Have you ever been trapped in a lie so convincing, so complete, that it became your reality? I was. For years, I lived someone else's life, pretending to be someone I was not, hiding behind a perfect mask. It all started with a single decision, a desperate choice I made after a tragic accident that stole my past and replaced it with a lie. I became Sarah, the woman I never was, so I could hold on to the life I thought I could never have. But secrets have a way of catching up with you, and when the truth finally started to slip through the cracks, everything I had built began to unravel. This is the story of how I faced the woman I was pretending to be, and how I finally found the strength to live my truth. On our anniversary, my husband's sister whispered something into his ear. I saw his hand tighten into a fist before he grabbed my wrist and dragged me out of the party. "Is it true?" he demanded, his eyes burning with rage. I smiled slowly and leaned in. "What do you think?" His face drained of colour. "Is it true?" he repeated, his anger palpable. I smiled again, leaning in closer. "What do you think?" His face lost all colour, and for a moment, everything seemed to freeze. Just 10 minutes earlier, everything had been perfect. Champagne flowed freely at our 10th anniversary celebration. The crystal chandeliers of the Caldwell Estate ballroom casting a warm golden light over Boston's elite. I wore Sarah's favourite designer, a midnight blue gown that clung to the curves she and I had once shared. My husband James stood across the room in his tailored tuxedo, his broad shoulders drawing attention as he laughed with the governor. For 3 years I had been living as Sarah Caldwell, my deceased twin sister, and no one suspected a thing. No one, not even her own husband. But before we continue this twisted tale of stolen identity and dangerous secrets, take a moment to subscribe. It's free and ensures you'll never miss another story of deception, revenge, and unexpected redemption. Ready to find out what happens next? Let's dive deeper. I lifted my champagne flute to my lips, the crimson shade of Sarah's signature colour, and scanned the room with practiced confidence. The string quartet played our wedding song as waiters moved about with silver trays of hors d'oeuvres. Senator Harrison winked as I passed, and I returned the gesture with a slight tilt of my head, an expression perfected from years of studying Sarah's mannerisms in home videos. Every moment of my existence was a performance, exhausting but necessary. "You've outdone yourself with this party," James's college roommate remarked, kissing my cheek. "I don't think I've seen half of Boston's financial district in one room since your wedding." "James insisted," I replied with Sarah's light, breathy laugh. "You know how he loves to remind everyone of his perfect life." And it was perfect, on the surface. The successful investment banker with his beautiful socialite wife, their restored Beacon Hill brownstone, featured in architectural magazines, charity board memberships, and weekend sailing trips to Martha's Vineyard. It was all part of a carefully curated image that James protected religiously. Across the room, I caught him watching me. Unlike most husbands celebrating 10 years of marriage, there was no warmth in his gaze, only assessment, like I was a prized possession reflecting his worth. Before the accident, during rare family gatherings where both Sarah and I were present, I had noticed how differently he treated her. His hands were always at her waist, possessive and intimate, while with me, he maintained a strange emotional distance but paraded me at every social function. "Darlings," he called, summoning me to his side as the Prescotts approached. "You remember Harold and Vivian, of course." I extended my hand exactly as Sarah would have, slightly limp, expecting a kiss rather than a handshake. "Vivian, that necklace is divine." These interactions were second nature now. I had studied Sarah's social calendar, her correspondence, and even her shopping habits. I knew which charities she supported and which ones she genuinely cared about. I had become a better Sarah than Sarah ever was. The evening proceeded flawlessly until the toasts began. James stood at the center of the ballroom, one arm loosely around my waist as he raised his glass to my beautiful wife. 10 years that have flown by, he announced to the guests. Sarah, you continue to surprise me every day. If only he knew how true that statement was. As applause rippled through the crowd, I noticed his sister Eliza moving purposefully toward us. Unlike the other guests in formal attire, she wore a simple black dress, which seemed to announce her disapproval of such extravagance. She had never liked Sarah, or me by extension, seeing her brother's marriage as beneath the Caldwell legacy. But tonight there was something in her expression that made my stomach tighten. She reached James, her fingers gripping his sleeve as she whispered in his ear. Whatever she said took only a few seconds, but the effect was immediate. I watched James's face transform, confusion, disbelief, and then something terrifying. His hand, still holding his champagne flute, clenched so tightly I thought the stem might snap. Then his eyes found mine across the room and something primal and dangerous flickered in them. Before I could react, he crossed the room in 4 long strides, his fingers closing around my wrist with enough force to bruise, though his societal smile remained in place. "Excuse us," he said to the couple I had been chatting with. "My wife and I need a private moment." The nearby guests chuckled knowingly. An anniversary celebration, a husband whisking away his wife, if only they knew. He pulled me through the French doors and onto the terrace, then down marble steps into the garden's maze. His grip never loosened, and the sweet scent of summer roses mixed oddly with the violence of his movements. When we reached the center of the maze, where a small fountain bubbled, he finally released me, leaving angry red marks on my skin. "James, you're hurting me," I said, rubbing my wrist. "Denny doesn't lie," he spat, pacing like a caged animal. "Eliza had your glass tested. Sarah's DNA doesn't match yours." My heart pounded in my chest. This moment, the one I had been preparing for and dreading for 3 years, had finally come. Eliza had always been suspicious of subtle changes in Sarah after the accident, watching me with narrowed eyes at family gatherings. "Do you know what else she found?" His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "A familial match. Not identical, but close enough to suggest a sibling." "Is it true?" he demanded. I considered my options. Denial might buy me some time, but the evidence was damning. Confession might destroy everything I had built, but there was a third option, one I had prepared for. "Is it true?" he demanded again, his eyes burning with rage. I smiled slowly and leaned in. "What do you think?" His face drained of color. In that stunned silence, I felt a strange power shift between us. For 3 years, I had lived in fear of discovery, maintaining a persona. Now, with the truth teetering on exposure, I realized I held more cards than he knew. "You think you know everything now, James," I continued, my voice steady despite my racing pulse. "You think Eliza's little DNA test tells the whole story. There are things about your perfect wife, your perfect marriage, and your perfect family that would make tonight's revelation seem trivial." His confusion was palpable, just as I'd anticipated when I confronted him with one dangerous truth, only to reveal an even more perilous one behind my carefully crafted smile. My mind raced through the backup plan I had set for this very moment. The hidden evidence, the offshore accounts in Sarah's name, the photos locked in a safety deposit box across town. Everything I needed to ensure that if I fell, the entire Caldwell empire would go down with me. "We should return to our guests," I said softly, glancing back at the distant lights of the party. "After all, it's our anniversary. We can discuss this later, when you're ready to hear the whole truth, not just Eliza's version." I turned toward the party, Sarah's diamond bracelet catching the moonlight on my wrist as I walked, while James stood frozen, his world crumbling around him. I let him stew in his confusion as we rejoined the gathering, my smile plastered perfectly in place, the smile Sarah had perfected. But beneath that composed exterior, memories of that rainy night 3 years ago came flooding back, the night everything changed. The windshield wipers fought in vain against the torrential downpour as Sarah drove us along the coastal highway. We rarely spent time together, but she'd insisted on this sister weekend in Cape Cod, claiming she wanted to fix our fractured relationship. I had my doubts, but I was hopeful. James thinks I'm at a CH retreat, she said, tapping her manicured nails against the steering wheel of her luxury sedan. He'd never understand me spending time with you. Her words stung, but I was used to Sarah's casual cruelty. Since childhood, she'd wielded her 3-minute seniority like a weapon, positioning herself as the superior twin. Where I was bookish and reserved, Sarah was vibrant and calculating. She collected people like trophies, discarding them when they no longer served her purpose. "Still not over the James thing?" she asked, glancing sideways at me. "Honestly, Rachel, it's been 7 years. You dated for what, 3 months in college?" "6, I corrected quietly, "and it was serious until you decided you wanted him." Sarah laughed, a sound both melodic and sharp. "He was obviously meant for me. Look at our life now." She flicked her wrist, her diamond bracelet catching the headlights of passing cars. "You would have bored him to death in that little professor apartment of yours." That was Sarah, taking what she wanted without remorse. First, it was my favourite toys, then my college boyfriend, then the inheritance our grandmother had specifically left for my education. Each betrayal solidified something inside me, hardening my heart toward my twin until our bond was reduced to a biological connection, not an emotional one. "Besides," she continued, "I did you a favour. James isn't the man you think." Her words were cut off as headlights suddenly blinded us. A truck had crossed the median, hydroplaning directly into our lane. Sarah jerked the wheel, sending us spinning toward the guardrail. Metal screeched against metal as the car flipped and tumbled down the embankment toward the churning ocean below. I remember fragments: Sarah's scream, glass piercing my face, the metallic taste of blood, the car coming to rest upside down, seawater already seeping through shattered windows. Sarah wasn't moving. Her body hung limp against the deployed airbag. My face felt wrong, torn open and burning. Through the haze of pain, I managed to unbuckle her seatbelt, push open her door against the current, and drag us both onto the rocky shore before consciousness abandoned me. I woke 3 days later in the hospital, my face completely bandaged, tubes snaking from my arms. A nurse stood nearby checking monitors. "She's awake," the nurse called, and footsteps hurried toward me. James appeared, haggard and unshaven. Behind him stood his sister, Eliza, her expression unreadable. Neither had ever been able to tell Sarah and me apart without our different hairstyles or clothing. "Sarah," James said, gripping my hand, "thank God. When they told me one of you didn't make it, I made a choice, one that would define the rest of my life." "Rachel's gone," I whispered, my voice hoarse from the breathing tube that had been removed earlier. The lie came easily, born from a lifetime of wanting what Sarah had. With my face unrecognizable beneath the bandages, only Eliza knew both twins had been in the car. She frowned slightly but said nothing as James collapsed into tears against my hospital bed. The months that followed were excruciating, physically and mentally. Multiple surgeries reconstructed my shattered face using titanium plates and donor bone. The doctors told Sarah that I would look similar, but never identical to my previous appearance, perfect for concealing the subtle differences between twins. During my recovery, I committed fully to becoming Sarah. I read her journals, studied her handwriting, and watched home videos James brought to the hospital. I learned her laugh, the way she gestured with her left hand, and her dislike for cilantro. I also uncovered darker truths. Sarah's diary revealed affairs with 2 of James's colleagues and a sustained relationship with someone she referred to only as M. She had been siphoning funds from James's family business, documenting every encounter in meticulous detail. When I was finally released from the hospital, still recovering and unfamiliar with my new face, I convinced James I needed time alone in our Beacon Hill home to adjust. Instead, I used Sarah's keys to access her private safe deposit box at the Boston National Trust. Inside, I found exactly what her diary had suggested: photographs documenting the affairs, account numbers for hidden funds, and evidence implicating James's family in decades of tax fraud. Sarah hadn't just been cheating, she had been building insurance. I memorized every document before returning them to the box. If my deception were ever discovered, I'd need leverage against the powerful Caldwell family. What started as an impulsive decision in a hospital bed grew into something far more calculated, a chance to become the woman James thought he'd married. Better, more loyal, more loving. Yet, as I assumed Sarah's life, her clothes, her friends, her marriage bed, guilt sometimes threatened to overwhelm me. Not for taking her identity, but because I was falling in love with the same man she had stolen from me years ago. Standing at our anniversary party, watching James's world crumble with Eliza's revelation, I understood. Sarah and I weren't so different after all. We both took what we wanted. Consequences be damned. The first 6 months of becoming Sarah were the hardest. Every morning I studied my new face in the mirror, memorizing its angles and expressions, ones that weren't quite mine, but weren't fully hers either. I practiced her signature, her laugh, and her gestures. I created systems for everything: note cards for important dates, spreadsheets for her friends and relationships, and even a voice recorder to practice her cadence. What I hadn't anticipated was navigating a marriage that was clearly falling apart before the accident. James and I moved around each other with the careful wariness of strangers in those early months. He attributed my emotional distance to the trauma and grief of losing my sister, while I saw his coldness as a necessary space for healing. Over time, though, I began to realize that the truth was far more complex. "You don't have to sleep in the guest room anymore," I said one night, 6 months after returning from the hospital. "The doctors say my face has healed enough." James looked surprised. "Are you sure?" "Before the accident, you said—" I waited, my heart racing, remembering what Sarah had told me. "You said you needed space," he finished carefully, "that we needed to reassess our relationship once the charity season was over." I swallowed hard. Sarah's journals had hinted at trouble in the marriage, but never to this extent. Had she been planning to leave him? The thought gave me an unexpected advantage, a clean slate. The accident had changed everything. "James," I said, taking his hand, "nearly dying makes you rethink what really matters. I don't want space anymore." That night marked the start of rebuilding our marriage, or rather creating a new one. I approached James differently than Sarah had. I genuinely wanted to know about him. I asked about his work, remembered small details he mentioned, and surprised him with his favourite meals, small gestures Sarah had long since abandoned. "You're different," he remarked one evening at dinner, his eyes studying me with a mixture of puzzlement and affection. "Softer somehow." "Different how?" I asked cautiously. He took a moment swirling his wine. "Before, you never would have asked that. You'd have changed the subject or made a joke." He reached for my hand. "I like this version of you." The guilt hit me unexpectedly and with overwhelming force. He was falling in love with me, not Sarah, and he still thought I was his wife. Some nights, I lay awake beside him, wondering if I should tell him the truth. But each morning, as I made Sarah's favourite breakfast or kissed him goodbye, I chose deception again. Because somewhere between signing Sarah's name and sharing his bed, I had fallen in love with James Caldwell, not the James Sarah had written about, the controlling and distant man, but a man capable of tenderness and humour when approached differently. We created new routines: Sunday morning runs along the Charles River, cooking classes on Wednesdays, spontaneous weekend trips to small coastal towns. The close calls were rare but still happened. Sarah's college roommate came to visit from Chicago, confused by Sarah's new interest in history documentaries, something I couldn't hide from the Netflix queue. My explanation about finding comfort in structured narratives during recovery seemed to satisfy her. At Christmas, James's cousin pointed out how I'd stopped interrupting people during conversations. Trauma can reset neural pathways, I explained, recalling an article I had saved for just such moments. The doctor says personality shifts are common after serious injuries. The most dangerous encounter came from Sarah's longtime hairstylist, who noticed I now parted my hair differently. "You always insisted the right side was your good side," she said, raising an eyebrow as she looked at me in the mirror. "The scarring is less noticeable this way," I replied, pointing to a faint line just beneath my jaw, one of the few remaining physical marks of the accident. She nodded sympathetically, and the moment passed without further incident. As I settled into Sarah's life, I began noticing unsettling patterns within the Caldwell family. At family gatherings, conversations would come to a halt when I entered the room. James's father exchanged meaningful looks with Eliza when company finances were discussed. Once I overheard James arguing with his brother, insisting that certain matters needed to stay internal to maintain plausible deniability. Sarah's secret files now began to make more sense. The Caldwell investment firm wasn't just successful, it operated in shady, grey areas of legality. Tax documents revealed fraudulent practices, client accounts showed signs of embezzlement, and correspondence hinted at insider trading. Sarah hadn't just been protecting herself from James, she'd been documenting the corruption within his entire family. The most disturbing discovery, though, was Eliza's apparent vendetta against Sarah. While everyone else treated me with distant politeness, Eliza watched me closely, setting conversational traps I barely managed to avoid. Her suspicions seemed more than just a protective instinct toward her brother. "You look tired, Sarah," she remarked one evening at a family dinner. "Those under-eye circles remind me of Rachel. She always had that hollow look. Remember?" The casual cruelty confirmed my suspicions. Eliza knew about Sarah's affairs and perhaps even her plans to leave James. More troubling still was the implication that Eliza had recognized me from the start, but was simply waiting for the right moment to expose my deception. I doubled down on my efforts, becoming more Sarah than Sarah had ever been. I was more attentive to James, more involved in charity work, and more careful with every interaction with the Caldwells. At the same time, I began collecting my own evidence on Eliza. I tracked her unexplained absences, photographed documents when I visited the family offices, and started building a case of my own. Living another woman's life began as an act of self-preservation, but soon evolved into calculated revenge against a sister who had taken everything from me. Now, as I caught Eliza whispering to James at our anniversary party, I realized it had turned into something far more complicated, a high-stakes game where my heart, my future, and possibly my freedom were all on the line. As James and I drove home from the party in silence, I knew the final act of my performance had begun. 4 months of careful planning had led me to this moment. I had been preparing for the day when I would finally make my move. It all began innocently enough, last Thanksgiving at the Caldwell estate, while the family gathered for pre-dinner drinks. I excused myself to use the restroom near Eliza's private office. With the family distracted by football and cocktails, I slipped inside with my phone camera ready. 15 minutes of rapid-fire photography gave me access to bank statements, correspondence, and a particularly damning spreadsheet that tracked funds diverted to a shell company in the Caymans. Then, just as I was finishing up, Eliza's husband Michael appeared in the doorway. My heart pounded as I quickly stashed the documents. "Aspirin," I said, gesturing to my temple. "My head is killing me. I know Eliza keeps some in her desk." He hesitated, eyes narrowing slightly before his social training kicked in. "Top right drawer." Don't tell her I told you, I said with a conspiratorial smile. Our secret. That close call only strengthened my resolve. The next week, I bought high-end surveillance equipment disguised as ordinary objects, phone chargers with hidden cameras, decorative clocks with microphones, and wireless speakers that could do both. When the Caldwells hosted their annual Christmas charity event, I arrived early to help with preparations and strategically placed my devices throughout Eliza's home office and the family library, where private discussions often took place. The footage I gathered over the next few months exceeded my expectations. Not only was Eliza embezzling from the family business, but she was also having an affair with James's business partner, Richard. Their pillow talk exposed a plan to systematically weaken James's position within the company by documenting his minor errors and gradually restricting his access to key clients. James is too soft, Eliza had told Richard during one meeting recorded in February. He still believes in playing by the rules. The family voted, and he needs to be sidelined before he uncovers the discrepancies in the Chin account and has a crisis of conscience. Richard nodded, refilling their whiskey glasses. Your father agrees. He knows James would crumble under SEC questioning. He's always been the weak link. Every revelation was carefully logged, encrypted, and backed up. I created a detailed digital archive of the Caldwell family's financial misconduct over 3 generations, tax evasion schemes, manipulated client accounts, and bribed officials. I included Sarah's original evidence alongside my own, building an airtight case that could obliterate the entire Caldwell empire. But documents alone weren't enough. I needed insurance, someone outside the situation who could release everything if something were to happen to me. After careful thought, I chose Dr. Monica Lynn, my former therapist from before the accident. She had no ties to Sarah or the Caldwells. I need you to hold something for me, I told her during a coffee meeting, sliding an encrypted drive across the table. It's insurance. If you don't hear from me every 30 days with a specific code phrase or if something happens to me, deliver copies to these addresses. I handed her sealed envelopes with instructions for the SEC FBI and 3 major financial newspapers. Rachel, she said, using the name she knew me by. Are you in danger? Just cautious, I replied. Some people collect art. I collect secrets. By the time our 10th anniversary arrived, my preparations were complete. As James drove us home from the party, occasionally glancing at me with a mix of horror and confusion, I felt an unexpected calm. The garden confrontation had merely been the opening move in a game I had been preparing for years. When we arrived home, James poured himself a generous drink and paced our living room. Who are you? He demanded. Instead of answering, I walked to the bookshelf and removed a false-packed classic novel, one of Sarah's hiding places I had discovered years ago. I pulled out a single photograph and handed it to James. Before we discuss who I am, I said, let's talk about who your sister really is. The photo showed Eliza and Richard in an intimate embrace in her office dated 6 months ago. James stared at it, his expression shifting from confusion to anger. What the hell is this? Where did you get this? Same place I got these, I replied, opening my laptop to display financial records showing Eliza's systematic theft from the company. And this is just the beginning. I have evidence of everything, James. Every secret, every crime, every betrayal in your family, including what your father did with the pension fund in 2018. His face drained of colour as I mentioned the family's most carefully guarded scandal. How could you possibly know about that? Sarah knew, I said simply. And now I know. The question isn't whether I'm Sarah. It's whether you can afford for me not to be. I watched him process this, his legal mind calculating the implications. Are you blackmailing me? I'm offering perspective, I corrected. Eliza wants to destroy me because I threatened her position as your father's favourite. She never cared about you or your marriage. She wanted Sarah gone because your wife was gathering evidence against the family. James collapsed onto the sofa, the weight of betrayal crushing him. So it's true, then? You're Rachel? The moment had arrived for my calculated confession. I sat across from him, maintaining eye contact. Yes, Sarah died in that accident. The injuries to my face required complete reconstruction, and in the hospital, when everyone assumed I was her, I let them. Why? He whispered. Why would you pretend to be your own sister, live her life, share her bed? Initially survival, I replied. The doctor said I would need multiple surgeries, specialized care. Sarah had insurance money, security, everything I'd lost when she stole you from me years ago. I leaned forward, but then something unexpected happened. I fell in love with you. The real you, not the man Sarah described in her journals. His expression hardened. And now you're threatening to destroy my family if I expose you? I'm ensuring mutual survival, I countered. Tomorrow morning you have a choice. You can tell everyone I'm an imposter and watch your family empire collapse under federal investigation, or you can stand beside your wife of 10 years and help me neutralize the real threat, Eliza. I rose and placed my hand on his shoulder, feeling him flinch beneath my touch. I've been a better wife to you than Sarah ever was. You said it yourself. You like this version of me. As I turned to leave him with his thoughts, he grabbed my wrist. Not roughly, like in the garden, but with desperate confusion. If I agree to this arrangement, what happens next? I smiled, knowing I had won. We continue our marriage. You help me remove Eliza from the company, and in return, I'll protect your family's secrets from everyone except you. No more lies between us. In the silence that followed, I saw resignation in his eyes. By morning, when he appeared in the kitchen and wordlessly poured himself coffee, I knew my transformation was complete. I had evolved from victim to deceiver to architect of my own future. We'll need a plan for Eliza, he said finally. I already have one, I replied. The Caldwell family's annual spring gala provided the perfect backdrop for our plan against Eliza. While outwardly maintaining the facade of perfect sister-in-law relations, James and I had spent weeks meticulously preparing her downfall. Are you certain this will work? James asked as he adjusted his bow tie in the bedroom mirror. Eliza made one critical mistake, I replied, fastening Sarah's diamond earrings that now felt rightfully mine. She assumed she was the only one watching. We arrived separately at the gala, James directly from the office, I fashionably late in a gown Sarah would have chosen. The Caldwell patriarch greeted me with his customary kiss on the cheek, oblivious to the fact that his daughter had exposed me as an imposter to James. Eliza stood nearby, her triumphant smile barely concealed as she watched us. Sarah, she said, embracing me with practiced insincerity. James mentioned you weren't feeling well. I'm surprised you made it. I wouldn't miss tonight for anything, I replied, matching her false warmth, especially with the exciting company announcement. Her smile faltered briefly. Announcement? Didn't James tell you? He insisted on keeping it a surprise. As I glided away, I caught James's eye across the room. He nodded imperceptibly and approached the small stage where a microphone stood ready. The crowd quieted as he tapped the glass in his hand. Thank you all for coming tonight, he began, his voice resonating with authority that had been missing in our early marriage. The Caldwell Group has always prided itself on family leadership and integrity. Eliza moved toward the front, confusion evident on her face. Tonight, I'm pleased to announce a restructuring of our executive team, James continued. The board has approved my recommendation for a new chief compliance officer who will report directly to me. His father, sitting in the front row, frowned, clearly unaware of this development. Richard Rich Evans will be stepping down as a partner effective immediately, James announced, causing a stir of whispers. My sister Eliza will transition from her role as CFO To head our new charitable foundation, he continued. Eliza's face twisted with fury as she realized what was happening. Her powerful positions, both professional and as James's most trusted advisor, were being stripped away publicly. James then added that they would conduct a thorough audit of all accounts previously managed, ensuring complete transparency for clients and regulators. The message was clear. Eliza pushed her way through the crowd toward James, but his father intercepted her, gripping her arm tightly while still maintaining his public smile. Later that evening, in the Caldwell estate study, the family confrontation unfolded just as we had planned. "Have you lost your mind?" Eliza hissed at James. "You can't remove me. I built half those client relationships." "Show them, James," I said quietly from my position by the fireplace. James opened his laptop, revealing video footage of Eliza and Richard discussing their embezzlement scheme and plans to undermine James. The elder Caldwell's face hardened as he watched. "Is this authenticated?" he asked. "Multiple sources," James replied. "And there's more. Records of transfers, altered documents, communications with offshore accounts." "You put her up to this," Eliza spat, pointing at me. "She's an imposter, tell them, James." All eyes turned to James. The moment of truth had arrived. "My wife has been instrumental in uncovering your betrayal," he said calmly. "Whether you accept her or not doesn't matter. The evidence speaks for itself. DNA doesn't lie." "Neither do bank records," I countered, stepping forward. "You have a choice, Eliza. Accept the generous offer to head the foundation with strict financial oversight, or explain to federal investigators why client funds were diverted through your personal accounts." The ultimatum hung in the air as Eliza realized her defeat. She had gambled on exposing me without anticipating that I had prepared my own weapon against her. "This isn't over," she whispered, but the fight had drained from her voice. As we left the estate that night, James took my hand in the car, the first genuine gesture of partnership since the anniversary revelation. "That was masterfully done," he said, his voice a mix of admiration and lingering fatigue. "I learned from the best," I replied. "Sarah taught me that power lies in knowing people's secrets." After Eliza's effective neutralization, James and I built a new kind of marriage, one grounded in pragmatic truth rather than romantic illusion. He knew who I really was, and I understood the family I had married into. We were accomplices now, bound by mutual secrets and survival. "We need to discuss the parameters," James said one evening in his home office, always seeking structure. "Publicly, nothing changes," I explained. "I remain Sarah Caldwell, your devoted wife. You remain the rising star of the Caldwell Group, untarnished by scandal." "Privately?" he asked, looking for clarity. "Privately, no more lies. You know I'm Rachel. I know about your family's financial misdeeds. We hold each other's destruction in our hands." "That's not a marriage," he objected. "That's mutually assured destruction," I agreed. "But it could become something else over time. Something genuine." The transition wasn't smooth. Some nights, James would look at me across the dinner table with confusion in his eyes, trying to reconcile the woman he had grown to love with the knowledge of my deception. Other times, he would ask about Rachel, about me, trying to separate the real person from the performance. "Did you always love books, or was that Sarah?" he asked once. "That was me," I admitted. "Sarah preferred magazines and social media. She never finished a novel in her life." The cooking classes we took, also me. Sarah ordered takeout, or had staff prepare meals. Gradually, these conversations painted a picture for James of the woman he had actually been living with, and how different she was from the wife he thought he'd married. To my surprise, he seemed to prefer the truth. "I think I've been happier these past 3 years than in the 7 before," he confessed one night. "I always felt Sarah was playing a role, that she married me for the Caldwell name. The woman I've been with since the accident, you seem to genuinely care." I do care, I whispered, the admission frightening in its vulnerability. Our arrangement evolved as James began dismantling his family's questionable business practices from within. He hired legitimate compliance officers, returned misappropriated funds through complex legal maneuvers, and gradually steered the Caldwell Group toward ethical operations without triggering public scandal. Meanwhile, I kept a careful watch on Eliza, who had retreated to her role heading the foundation but remained a potential threat. The surveillance equipment remained in place, monitoring her communications and movements. Trust would never be part of our family dynamic. 6 months after our confrontation, the inevitable happened. During a charity event, one of Sarah's oldest friends approached me with troubled eyes. "I've been doing some research into facial recognition," she said quietly. "The proportional changes in your face don't match typical reconstruction patterns. You look like Sarah but measured differently." My heart pounded as she continued. "You remind me more of Rachel now. Sarah's sister, the one who died in the accident." I maintained a composed smile. "Trauma changes people, Charlotte. Sometimes physically, sometimes deeper." "This isn't trauma," she insisted. "This is something else entirely." Before I could respond, James appeared at my side, his hand protectively at my waist. "Charlotte, how wonderful to see you. I hope you're not monopolizing my wife's time with ancient history." His subtle warning was clear. Charlotte retreated, but the encounter shook me. That night, I prepared to activate my contingency plans, ready to flee if necessary. "Don't let James catch me downloading files in his office. We'll handle this together." "She knows," I said, letting her imagine. "Without DNA evidence, it's just gossip," he responded, "and Charlotte cares too much about her standing in society to risk being labelled unstable." He was right. The whispers remained nothing more than that. Whispers. Our carefully curated life carried on, solidified by James's growing influence in Boston's elite circles. Those who might question Sarah's identity found themselves subtly edged out of key social events and business opportunities. 3 years after our anniversary confrontation, 6 years since the accident that had transformed me into Sarah, James and I sat on our terrace overlooking Boston Harbor. The evening was unexpectedly warm for April, with the sky painted in deep sunset hues. "I received some interesting news today," James said, swirling his whiskey. "The statute of limitations has expired on the Chandler account irregularities." I grasped the significance immediately. The last major financial wrongdoing that could have brought down the Caldwell Group was now legally untouchable. The threat of exposure that had served as our mutual safeguard was fading away. "Where does that leave us?" I asked, voicing the question that had long lingered between us, unspoken. James looked at me thoughtfully, his expression unreadable. Over the years, he had gracefully aged into his role, silver streaking his temples. "It leaves us with a choice," he replied after a pause. "We can continue as we are, bound by secrets and practicality, or ... he trailed off, his gaze intense. "Or we could start over." I didn't understand. "Not as James and Sarah Caldwell? Not even as James and Rachel?" I asked, feeling the weight of his words. James set down his glass and took my hands. "What if we left? Sold the company, liquidated the assets, moved somewhere new, somewhere no one knows the Caldwells or the complicated history of identical twins?" The suggestion took me by surprise. "You would give up everything, the Caldwell legacy?" He shrugged. "The legacy is tainted. It always has been. As for position, I've learned that there's freedom in leaving expectations behind. What about Eliza? Your father? They've been contained but never truly neutralized. Eventually another scandal will emerge. It's better to separate cleanly with our resources intact." His proposal was both terrifying and exhilarating, to abandon the identity I had so carefully built, to start a new life. But this time, one chosen freely, not born from desperation. Who would we become? I asked. Whoever we want, he said. That's the point. 3 months later, we signed the final papers, transferring control of the Caldwell Group to a management team led by James's most trusted lieutenant. Eliza fought the sale fiercely, but her father, weary of corporate battles and family tension, overruled her. The night before we left Boston, I stood before the mirror in our bedroom. The face staring back was neither entirely Sarah's nor the Rachel I had been before. It was uniquely mine, forged by accident, deception, and ultimately, choice. James appeared behind me, placing a gold compass in my hand. For our new direction, he said simply. Do you ever miss her? I asked, the question that had haunted me for years finally out in the open. The real Sarah. James considered this carefully. I miss the idea of her sometimes, the woman I thought I married. But I've come to realize she never truly existed. Sarah projected whatever image suited her in the moment. As for you, the woman who took her place, he turned me to face him directly. You began as her mirror image, reflecting what you thought I wanted. But somewhere along the way, you became real, more authentic than she ever allowed herself to be, even built on deception, especially then. He brushed his fingers along my cheek. You had to discover who you truly were while pretending to be someone else. Perhaps the hardest path to authenticity imaginable. The following morning, we boarded a private plane, our new passports in hand, names we had chosen together. The woman who had been Sarah Caldwell, who had been Rachel Morgan before, was about to begin her third life. This time, one chosen with clear eyes and, improbably, with love that had survived the ultimate test of truth. As Boston faded beneath us, I closed Sarah's diary for the final time. No more signatures to practice, no more mannerisms to mimic. The ultimate revenge against my sister hadn't been taking her identity, but finding happiness in the life she had never appreciated. Ready? James asked as the plane reached cruising altitude. I smiled, a smile of my own, not Sarah's practiced one. I've been ready since that night in the hospital. I just didn't know what I was waiting for. The deception that began as survival and evolved into revenge had ultimately become the strangest form of salvation. My sister's face had given me a second chance, but it would be my own heart that would define what I did with it.